Welcome, guys, to the Holistic Sovereign Show. It's great to have you guys back. I know I've been a little bit MIA, but we're back because I found the perfect guest for today's episode. We're going to be talking about diet and everything around that. I've got Jacob here from JacobsReGEneration. Key in there is the word gene, because it's all about those genes and optimizing. And he is just amazing with his knowledge on the Bible and biblical diet and natural medicines and a bunch of other stuff that I'm super excited to get into. We were just chatting right before we got on the call, and he said something mind-blowing, and I was like, man, hold on, we got to get this on the recording. The people have to hear this. So I'm super stoked to have him here. Jacob, welcome to the Holistic Sovereign Show.
Appreciate that. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So before we got on the call, well, actually, let me say this. So I found Jacob actually on TikTok. So you were actually already following me. And I was like, man, I got to get this guy on the show because I've actually had this diet episode planned for like 2 months, but everything is like slower for me right now because I'm pregnant. But I'm at the last stretch here, so I have more energy now, and I'm putting that to good use. But I saw your content. I was like, man, this is great. And for those of you that usually come on, just to hear about more of the legal stuff, you might be thinking to yourself, what's this about? Why are we talking about diet? But you have to realize everything is connected. And I genuinely believe that the beast system, that we talk about so often here and expose, really tries to make us sick and, puts toxins in our food and, basically gives us food that's inedible and tries to pass it off as food because it is much easier to control a population that it has, mind fog and health issues and is dependent on the medical, industrial complex. So I figured, hey, let's have a conversation about this because I personally eat animal based. I also try to, get as clean food as possible, and try to pretty much keep it simple and follow the Bible, of course. So like I want to learn all the biblical things. My scriptural knowledge is not as good as Jacob's a pro. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Jacob, and I would actually love to pick it up from where we were talking about. I think this will be really interesting to a lot of you guys. Jacob said right before we got on the call, we were having a conversation. He said, the most valuable thing right now that you can buy isn't silver or gold. It's actually land and cattle. And you were about to give me some scripture and I cut you off. So I would love for you to elaborate on that.
For sure. So yeah, it was Robert Kiyosaki who kind of gave me the idea uh, about the land and the cattle being more valuable than silver, gold, or any kind of currency in all reality. Because as long as we have the products that we need to take care of ourselves and our families, then we're also going to that we're going to have everything that we need. So, for instance, the verse that basically summarizes it is, for the abundance of butter, they will consume, or they will eat the curds that are in the land. So, whenever we have, so there's the verse right before that, and I apologize. In that day, they will own one cow and two goats or two sheep. And so, by default, if you're owning goats or sheep and cows, they're going to create everything essentially that your body needs nutrition wise. So the term holy cow can also come from the fact that the cow and the beef liver primarily is the most copper dense food product in the world. So it's a superfood, the beef and the beef liver primarily. And so when we start to eat the copper dense foods, we start to fix the number one deficiency in the world, which is a copper deficiency. And so the term holy cow can kind of start to take on a little bit of a different meaning or connotation, because if you can get everything that you need from one animal, whether it be the cheese, the yogurt, the milk, the curds, or whatever, the ghee. There's so many different products that you can get from the animals that basically lactate or that you can get milk from. So the best animal you can get for your home, holy cow, right? That's number one. Cow's going to give you everything that you need, and then if you decide to slaughter it, depending on the size of your house, you're going to have enough meat for 6 months to a year, if not longer. But other than the cow, the term the holy cow, we have the term the goat, right? Where does this term really come from? And it goes kind of deep, but one of the meanings of where that terminology comes from is have enough goat milk for all of your home, Proverbs 27:27, but especially for your young maidens. And so goat milk basically has almost every mineral that the body needs for the day. And so that's why bodybuilders, if they can't get breast milk, they will buy goat milk instead because it's the second most mineral dense drink in the world that we can consume next to our mother's breast milk. And it actually has copper, trace mineral amounts of copper, the number one deficiency in the world. And it also has a whole bunch of magnesium. And the magnesium is the number two deficiency on the planet. So if we're magnesium deficient, or as well if we're copper deficient, we're going to suffer from skin issues. We're going to suffer from musculoskeletal issues. We're going to suffer from hair loss, just all different kinds of immune dysfunction. And what it comes back down to is if we're mineral deficient, what it is it causes cellular degeneration. And so if the salt has lost its flavor, what good is it but to become trampled upon and basically taken advantage of by the third leading cause of early death in the world, which equals doctors. And so misdiagnosis is, if I could use that term or that word, a misdiagnosis is basically the third destroyer of human lives in the world. And so when
Mm.
we start to understand this beast system and why these doctors wear these white coats and where that comes from, pharmaceuticals, where it comes from as far as like pharmakia, the Greek etymology, and basically it's a form of witchcraft because we know that as long as we put the natural herbs and minerals back into the body, you're going to get way more from using natural salt than you will any medication in the world. And that's why it's a covenant of salt that will last forever. Numbers 18:19, salt every offering. Leviticus 2:13. When we get the salt back into the body naturally grows like a tree. And so mankind is likened to a tree, but in order for that tree to grow, it has to get the minerals, the salt covenant. It has to get the sun, because the sun can have more than one meaning. It has to get on the ground. Take off your shoes, Moses, because you're standing on holy ground. I like to sometimes think of that as a parable to allow us to understand that we need to ground if we want to get rid of the inflammation that's stuck in our body. Because really, in all honesty, the number one easiest way to heal, arguably, is going to be through grounding and just getting the feet, taking off the shoes, going on the grass, and getting in the sun. And so when we combine the grounding with the minerals, the sunlight, and then the lotion, or sorry, not the motion, which equals lotion for the cell, basically what we start to do is we rehydrate the cell and then we fix the mitochondrial issue, which comes from a mineral deficiency because everybody, 94 plus percent of all people, are magnesium and copper deficient. And so when we start to get 5 to 10 grams of salt back into the body, that's the recommendation from the French Cardiac Heart Association. That's when we start to get rid of all. My journey started with salt and using salt when I wake up, before I go to the gym, during the gym, after the gym, in the sauna. And so creating a positive, grounding, getting the sunshine with the ground, consuming the minerals before, during, and after. When I started to do that, my life basically started to change because I didn't realize that for 25 plus years, I was mineral deficient. So I was able to at
Mm.
least solve the number two deficiency with salt. At the time, we were using Celtic salt. Now we know that Celtic salt is a little bit high in heavy metals. Same thing with pink Himalayan salt. It's super high in radioactive materials, cadmium, lead. So the last salt that we really want to be consuming is Himalayan salt. And if you break down the word Himalayan, Himalayan, right? And it's so what they're saying is Himalayan salt is giant's blood. And if you look at the Himalayan structures or the mountains, and you take a look at pork ribs or you take a look at meat and then the mountain, the petrified mountain, the Himalayan mountains, it looks exactly the same, but just petrified over time. So we see a lot of these mountains and stuff, they're really just petrified giants, because when you go into the mountain, you literally can walk into a mountain where the mouth is still open, and then you go down the esophagus of the mountain and you see the inside of the mountain looking like a giant human. And so, anyways, back to point. So they're getting the Himalayan salt from the mountains, and on top of it being giant mixed in over time or being mineralized. There's just they use so many different explosives to mine that as well, that
Oh,
I
wow.
just wouldn't trust any kind of Himalayan salt, because always going. If you bring the salt through the airport, there's a very high chance that airport security is going to, when you bring it through the radar detector, whatever they use, it's going to be read as it has radioactive material. And so a lot of people bring their pink salt the plane because it's so high in heavy metals. And so what the American or just the world government, whatever the new world, whatever you want to call it, what they've done is they've taken away the salt covenant that will last forever, Numbers 18:19, salt every offering, Leviticus 2:13. To summarize it and to jump to the New Testament, if the salt has lost flavor, what good is it but to become trampled upon? And so what they've
I just read
allowed through
that
the
verse
beast
this
system,
morning.
beautiful, beautiful. It goes a little bit deeper, because if you bring it back one verse to Mark 9:48, it says where their worms never die. And so salt is so critical for detoxification. And if anybody ever gets radiation poisoning, the fastest way to clean off that radiation poisoning is by going in the ocean, magnesium or salt or baking soda, putting it in a bathtub and soaking in that solution. And that's supposed to be the most effective radiation cleanse that's out there, is salt and water. And the effect that the salt and the water has, when we combine them together, salt and water creates a positive electrical charge. But to take it a step further, you add the key lime, the salt, the water, and the key lime, and you have basically a small battery, so to speak. And so there's stories, well, it's just all facts, but they found these pots that they were using, that they used to fill with key limes. Yeah, lemons are fake. They didn't have them back in the day. But yeah, they were filling these pots with key limes and water, and and they were basically storing electrical energy that's coming from that source. And so, as far as alkalinity is concerned, the best thing we can do for our diet, the first thing I tell everybody basically before anything else, other than yes, we should be fasting 12 to 24 hours a day, no more than 14 hours a day if we're females, because it will mess up our cycles. But regardless, the first thing that we should do every morning is get the real salt, we get the distilled water, and the key lime. And those three things right there, the salt, the water, and the key lime, is going to detox the body of any kind of excess mold, yeast, candida,
Mm.
any kind of garbage that's been stuck in the gut, because we know that all disease starts in the gut, according to Hippocrates, founder of modern day medicine. And then the strength of a man is in his gut, Job 40:16. And so if the gut is always clogged and it's not able to breathe, then what ends up happening is that the blood becomes negative or basically stale. And so we know that the life's force is in the blood, Leviticus 2:13. So when we attach Leviticus 17:11, the life's force is in the blood. And so when we attach it all together, salting every offering, Leviticus 2:13, what that does is it basically vitalizes the life force, because magnesium, essentially in the salt, magnetizes the body and the blood's force. So the key lime, the salt, and the water is the fastest way next to fasting. When you combine the fasting with the salt, the water, and the key lime, you get much better benefits as well. And so if I had known that a couple of years ago, even my life would have changed. But when we combine the fasting 12 to 24 hours a day with the salt, the water, the key lime, what that does after like 3 days of doing that is it purges the body of essentially all of the toxins. And it's the easiest way to start the cleanse. Now, to take it a step further, instead of just using the salt, the water, and the key lime, because we know that that creates a positive charge and then it creates an alkaline environment. But to take it a step further, using the salt, water, key lime, cayenne pepper, and coconut oil or olive oil. what that's going to do is create an even more anti-yeast mold candida environment. And the coconut oil has MCTs, triglycerides, and that stuff right there basically repairs your brain, as well as it helps to reset the gut blood-brain barrier and the immune system itself. And the cayenne, it's a red color because basically of what it does for the blood and the life force of the blood itself. So anytime you can actually, if you're bleeding or if you have a wound or anything like that, you can actually take cayenne and just apply it to the skin,
Mhm.
take a band-aid or bandage, and then just get some pressure on there, and it's going to stop the bleeding. Even if you get a bit by a bee, all you got to do is throw some cayenne on there. After a couple minutes, you won't even really feel any kind of pain at all, because of the sensation that the cayenne creates on the skin, and it moves the blood around and it cleans it at the same time. So there's really nothing more powerful than cayenne. But what I recommend is starting with salt,
Right.
adding the key lime, getting the cayenne and the coconut oil in there, however which way you want to do it. And some people, they're not able to do coconut oil very well, so they can do olive oil. Eating olive oil is super beneficial for the brain and for BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, miracle growth of the
Mhm.
brain, and what it does for your skin as well. I recommend using olive oil on topically for the skin as opposed to coconut oil. You'll get some benefits from the coconut oil, but the coconut oil can basically cause excess sebum, or excess bacteria or oils on the skin. So we highly recommend using the olive oil. And then we actually have olive oil infused beef tallow, which is
Oh,
actually
nice.
right
I was
here.
about to ask, I was like, would you do that over the tallow? Because we use tallow exclusively.
Yeah, for sure. So I would just possibly keep. You're always going to have both around as long as you have the tallow. So if you get the best benefits from the tallow, just keep doing the tallow.
Mhm.
Sometimes it can be good to incorporate every other week, switch it out, or every other month, something like that, so the body doesn't
Mhm.
build up too much of a tolerance. But I would say that the tallow is going to be king of
Mhm.
basically everything because of the retinol that's found inside of the tallow, and it's just, who would have thought that rubbing animal fat on your body would actually be good for your body and your skin?
Right.
It sounds crazy, and I didn't really believe it until I started to like research it for the last couple months. And then Josh from Modern Roots Life.com, he basically created this tallow infusion with jojoba and calendula. I'm not sure what the calendula is, but I will say is that this is probably the best tallow that I've ever had, and I think he put
Awesome.
frankincense is in there
Mm.
too, and so it's really probably the best. I just finally got my package yesterday,
Nice.
and it's the best first time I've tried this tallow, and I gotta say it's way better than any olive oil or frankincense that I've used thus far. Not saying that the olive oil and the frankincense is a no go, but this beef tallow and the retinol that's found specifically in these animal based products, that's really why they're doing away with the animal based products. That's really why they don't want us to eat real grass fed meat or drink
Oh,
real
man.
raw milk. And it's why the US, why the beef system basically made milk, like goat milk, raw milk, illegal in America. But when you go to these other countries, all these other countries have goat milk, a plethora of goats and goat milk everywhere. At least one person that you talk to out of 10 is going to know where you can get some goat milk. And it's not going to be illegal in these other countries the way that it is in America. Somebody got a felony for selling goat milk a couple months ago, and I think he's still fighting the case. When it's
Mm.
literally in the Bible, have goat milk for all of your home, but especially for your young women, Proverbs 27:27. And what that goat milk does for women when they're on their menstrual cycles, it's superior to anything else. Having goat milk and salt while women are on their menstrual period, it's the best thing that they can basically consume to get rid of the pain and the cramps and everything like that. And so
Right.
that's why there's two parts of the verse. Have goat milk for all of your home. Okay, very good. For the children, for the mom and the dad, but then specifically for your young maidens to remind us that there's a thorn in our side sometimes and we have to deal with this pain in life, but at least there are some biblical remedies. Hallelujah. And we don't always have to go
Right.
down the oil based pharmaceutical route, which we adopted here in the last 50 or 60 years. And since we've adopted that, and since Neutrogena products and skincare products have taken over, we've all basically forgotten these simple biblical remedies. I mean, such as orgies, these home remedies like using frankincense on the skin, using olive
Mhm.
oil on the skin, using castor oil, cod liver oil. they're really regulating castor oil. They don't want people to really know too much about it, as well as cod liver oil on the internet. It's one of the things they won't really let me post about, or every time I do,
Wow.
they take down the video. And so that's the power, and that's how you know you're doing something right. Is usually when they take down your your
Man,
videos.
every video I put up gets taken down. It's crazy. It's like
I have a
it's
50%
a
record.
routine thing for us. We have to just like appeal almost every video. But yeah, that's how you know that you're putting out good stuff. Yeah, man, that is so crazy. I just learned about the cayenne because I just this last month, well, one, I'm pregnant, so I'm, thinking about my future and what I want to teach my kid, obviously, and trying to do the best thing for her and not use all of the, counterfeits essentially that they're creating. I mean, how many like retinol creams and things that they're creating out there, and you could just get it from tallow. But about a month ago, I got severe sun poisoning, and I was just miserable for like 2 to 3 days and just felt so helpless. And I was praying so much. I was just like praying for like miraculous healing, and was just like would go to bed and be like, Lord, please let me just be healed in the morning. Then I'd wake up and like I would just still be in pain. But by like day two or three, I went into the bath. So we started doing, raw milk baths. Like we get, raw milk from the farmer's market. We were doing Epsom salt baths because it was both me and my fiance that were, I was way worse though. So it was like horrible.
Yeah.
Um, but we were doing that. And then I was in the bath, and I came across the Barbara O'Neill video, like one of her lectures. And so I came across that, and she was talking about like the poultices, and like the potato poultice is cooling, and she was talking about the cayenne pepper helping with the cardiovascular system and getting the blood flow and everything. And so I was like, man, I'm gonna, try this stuff out. When I tell you, I usually with with the condition that I was in, it would take people a month minimum to recover. And I was way better after like a week of just applying the different remedies, because it was really bad. Like not only did I have, like a severe sunburn, like definitely like a third-degree burn, but I would be in so much pain every time I tried to walk. My legs were in so much pain, and I was retaining fluid in my ankles, and it was awful. And so yeah, so then I started doing that. I was doing the cayenne to get the fluid, moving. And it was like I would do like raw milk mixed with cayenne because it helps with the, with the sting. And yeah, yeah, it was. I had my baby shower like that weekend. So by then I was already like I had gotten the sun poisoning like on a Monday, and then like the shower was on like a Sunday, that a week later. And I was way better. It was like every day I would just get exponentially better just from doing like an Epsom salt bath. We were doing raw milk baths, both doing the poultices, doing the cayenne pepper to get everything moving. But I was amazed. Like I could see, so that definitely felt like to me, I was just calling out and praying, and it felt like the Holy Spirit just led me to, put that video on my feed. And I've just been, watching her more and more, because I'm like, man, the only thing with her is like she's like vegetarian, is like meat is bad, and so I don't I don't agree with that. But everything else she shares is nuts. So I like literally just recently learned about that too.
Yeah, I think Barbara was. I mean, first of all, she might have saved a billion lives by now. So go,
Yeah.
Barbara.
Yeah.
A lot of the salt stuff that I learned about, I learned through Barbara, and then I just furthered my studies and learned a little bit more.
Mhm.
Like for instance, Barbara's on point with a lot, but Barbara still recommends like Celtic or Baja Gold salt, and we know that those salts are full of heavy metals. And
Mhm.
so, what we want to do when we get a salt is we want to make sure that it's tested by a independent third party lab, and that way we know what we're actually paying for. And so, most of these salts that we're paying top dollar for, because Celtic salt sales have increased more than like 1,000% in the last couple of years, as well as goat milk sales. But anyway, so to pay that much, like $50 for a bag of Celtic salt because it's a blue bag, ooh, right? That's like highway robbery.
Fancy logo.
It's right. It's just not worth it. And what people are doing is there's, let's say they get 200 for the week, they're spending $50 on it, salt. And so that right there is like, that's just a big no-no in my book, overcharging for herbs and salt and stuff like that. So that's why we have the Salt of Life. It's trace mineral tested. It's from Southern California, Northern Mexico. And so it's mineral dense, but then it's also organically authentic. So there's no such thing technically as organic, because really what they did was they took the term organic and they used it as a marketing ploy to be able to sell an up-price organic item. So for instance, when we go to the store and we get organic beef, all right, well, the organic beef is going to be a little bit better than the regular ground beef, but you don't know really what it's getting fed or how much space those animals have. And so what we want to really get at the end of the day, if we go to the store, grass-fed, grass-raised, grass grass-fed, grass-raised, pasture-fed, and finished. I think there's like 4 terms that
Grass
goes with it.
finished. Yeah.
Grass finished, right. And so you want to make sure that it fits those 3 criterias. I mean, organic beef is going to be better than the regular beef, but the grass-fed, the grass-finished, the pasture-raised, right? Those are going to be the things that are going to be key to getting a good source of. Because the thing is, too, is if it's really grass fed, it's going to have a higher copper and magnesium as well as iron content. And so that's why we want to go to the beef, right? Holy cow, is because the beef, primarily the beef liver, has the copper, number 1 source for copper on the planet. Can't forget, that's why grandma and grandpa were always eating it, next to, I guess, them thinking it tasted good, which is kind of wild. But anyway, so we have the copper, it has magnesium, it has iron, and basically creatine. So everything that the body needs for the day. The healthiest I ever have been is when I ate nothing but beef and eggs and a little bit of avocado for a year. And what that does is it allows the body to go into this state of autophagy, ketosis, and we're allowing our bodies to go into a state of cellular regeneration that it hasn't experienced for years until we actually do a food elimination diet and until we actually do a low carb style lifestyle to allow the body to actually purge the heavy metals that are. A lot of people are like, oh, well, I just have to do the herbs and I'll just keep eating this way, or I can do the
Right.
herbs and I'll just eat the fruit. But the thing is, if you eat too much fruit, because a little bit of leaven will cause a lot of inflammation, a little bit of fruit will mess us up if we're not teaching the body how to get into ketosis. And so I'm not against fruit. However, the studies show is that if we're consuming more than 25 to 50 grams of carbohydrates per sitting, the body isn't able to actually digest that properly. So anything past 25 to 50 grams of carbs in one sitting is going to be basically turned into fat. And so that's why, unless the fruit on the tree is healthy, we shouldn't be eating the fruit unless we have gotten rid of the majority of the health issue through the ketogenic style diet. The ketogenic style diet is so effective not only for the physical health issues, but also the reason why I follow it is because I like to have a clear brain. And so it was adopted, the Atkins style diet was created basically in the 1920s, 1930s for children who were having epileptic seizures. So 7 or 9 out of 10 of these children, or 70 to 90% of the seizures, went away when they started to use this low carb ketogenic style diet, and they kept the carbs below 25 to 50 a day. So the more severe the illness, the less carbohydrate one can digest. Because the thing about carbohydrates is the carbs, even if it's from fruit, because fruit is fructose and sugar is sugar and glucose is glucose. It all goes basically back into the glucose tank. So there's a parasite, right, where their worms never die, Mark 9:48, and a little bit of leaven will cause a lot of inflammation. So if we're eating fruit and the body isn't detoxed and those critters in the gut haven't died off yet, that fruit is going to end up feeding them. And so the reason I bring this up is because I have so many people. They're like, Jake, I'm doing everything that you said, and I'm not healing. And I'm like, are you? Did you get rid of the fruit yet? They're like, no. I've been taught that fruit's so good my entire life. And I'm like, well, we have to earn our fruit. And so the issue is that we're not earning. If you work out every day, you have a very active lifestyle, you can probably fit at least 50 to 100 grams of carbohydrate back into the body. But the thing is when we start to do the carbohydrate or the low carb style diet, we start to notice that there's two sources of energy, right? We have the ketones, which equals jet fuel, which equals no brain fog or depression whatsoever. Remember what it did for the children who started it, who had seizures. And then we have glucose, which is it's not bad, but glucose is more so the sugar energy, or the glucose tanks are more so for if we're doing very fast running, like sprints, if we're playing basketball, football, having that glucose is going to be key. But most people were stuck in our offices and we're not moving more than 15 minutes every 2 hours. And then that 2 hours or that 15 minutes that we have, we usually just, smoke a cigarette. We don't even get the sunshine because it's going to burn us. And
Scroll on
so,
TikTok.
what's that?
I say you just scroll on TikTok.
Right.
That's the break from
That's
big screen to small screen.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And so that sunlight is so key. Just to get the body, actually sunlight stimulates metabolism. And so when we stimulate metabolism, we also help stimulate ketone production. And so everybody's forgotten how to become fat adapted, how to use those two forms of energy, the glucose and the ketones. So the true test of health, in my opinion, and the people who I have found who have been in the best health are the people who are still able, and they practice it because it's a lifestyle, but they're able to use glucose and they're also able to use ketones. And what the most intelligent people that I've met and watched in the world do is they will rotate whether or not they're using glucose or ketones based upon how busy they are or what kind of a schedule they have. So if they're working all the time, they're going to be using the ketones. They're going to be using the jet fuel so that they can focus, concentrate. Jordan Peterson said that the carnivore style diet is a blessing and a curse because you start to work 19 or 20 hours a day and you only sleep 3 or 4 hours. And that's very true. And so people get into that work carnivore style diet. That's when the body needs rest, that's when we start to reintroduce the carbs every 3 to 4 days, because the body can start to create so many ketones and get so cellularly regenerative, if that's correct, that when it goes to sleep, it doesn't want to stay asleep for more than 3 or 4 hours. And so that's when you start to use the carbs, because when you use the carbs, you release tryptophan, and that tryptophan is going to knock you out for about 6 to 8 hours. And that right there is the easiest way to fall asleep on the ketogenic style diet, is to take a handful of carbs, maybe a little bit of honey or maple syrup, and then just eat that an hour or two before bed, preferably while the sun is still up. And what that's going to do after you've been in ketosis for a couple days or a couple weeks, it's going to knock the body right out. And that tryptophan is going to release dopamine, serotonin, and it's going to put the body in a state of rest. So it comes back down to using the glucose and using the sugar in the correct format and at the correct times, because the number one driver for cancer patients for their sickness is sugar. And when they get rid of the sugar, there's a book called Keto for Cancer. There's a lady who basically reversed her son's brain tumor through the ketogenic style diet, but it didn't happen until they got rid of the sugar. And so most people right now, I believe that the immune is so weak and there's so much gut dysbiosis that 9 out of 10 people, 9 out of 10 times we consume fruit, all we're doing is we're feeding the parasitic overgrowth. And so that's why I'm so big on trying to tell people, hey, time, like King Solomon said, don't shoot the messenger too, but everything for a time and a season, a time to embrace the fruit, maybe during the season that you're supposed to be eating it, I don't know, and a time not to. And what that's going to do is going to allow the body to go into that state of autophagy or ketosis, where it can jump back and forth between the glucose and the ketones. And that right there, it could also be likened into the land of milk and honey, right? You have milk or the cream or the fats, the ketones, and then you have the honey, you have the glucose, you have the fruit. And so as long as you can, for a time in the season, right, switching back between that correct fuel source for that correct person at that specific time, And your gut's going to tell you everything, right? So people are like, Jake, how long do I do it for? Well, your gut is going to tell you everything. And at the end of the day, if you're struggling, you're not getting any rest for a couple days or a couple weeks, guarantee that you probably need to get some carbohydrates back into your diet. But the thing is we first have to remove the leaven. We have to get the fasting back into the body. We have to get the salt back into the body, earn the minerals, and then we think about the fruit and we think about getting the glucose and getting the sugar and the fructose and stuff like that. And so um, H4O2, I believe, is structured water. And so there's H3O2, which is the fruit water. But when we structure the water, it creates a different molecularized structure, so to speak, which is very intelligent. And so people are like, oh, well, I don't drink water. I only drink H3O2 or smoothies. And I'm like, okay, well, you can do that. But there's also other forms of water that isn't completely dead. We know that when we drink water, we at least have to add the salt, and probably it's best to add the key lime too. But the thing about it is when we add the cayenne and the coconut oil, that's better than any kind of H3O2 drink or smoothie that you can drink on the planet. And so it's just knowing how to utilize the H3O2 or the H4O2 or the H2O itself, and knowing how to mineralize it, because everything has been demineralized. So if we're in America, I would basically recommend not eating any of the American fruit, and none of the American vegetables, because the land is so demineralized that you're not really getting a bang for your buck. So, for instance, if you go to Hawaii, or if next to the GMOs and Monsanto's and everything else that's going into the plant and the vegetable production here in America, but if you go to Hawaii or Puerto Rico or these South American countries, you got a mango tree, you got a papaya, you got a real banana tree, and you start to see, oh, well, these are real bananas, and bananas don't really exist the way that we've been taught they do in America. So you go, and on top of them being real, they're just so mineral dense that one mango in Puerto Rico is going to be way more mineral dense than like 3 or 4 mangoes in America.
Mm-hmm.
And next to the GMO pesticide factor that, I mean, Florida, right? That's one of my home states. They use a lot of like pesticides and garbage that they're throwing. So any kind of mango trees that are in Florida, unless it's really out in the boons, it's going to be full of pesticides and garbage.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's awesome. I think it also depends on where you are, because I live in Texas and a lot of our produce comes from Mexico. So I think it ends up being a bit better than what we have. Because like my dad, he lives in Canada, and yeah, when he came down here, he was like, "Oh my gosh, like all the produce is so different." And it's because he's all the way up there, everything he's getting is like totally, demineralized and yeah, like just not nutritionally the same level. And even if like I go to the farmer's market, the only fruit stand that we have is a peach stand. Like that's it. Everything else is going to be like your, whatever people are making pasta, whatever, out of their, but a lot of meat too, because I think we're in Texas, so the farmers market's got to have a lot of what's it called? The I don't know what you'd call them, farmers, poultry farmers. So yeah, so we try to get stuff from there. But what's great is here in Texas, we have our local grocery store called HEB, and they actually have grass-fed, grass-finished red meat, and that's something to look out for, because something that I've heard people say is like, well, all cows are grass fed, so that's a scam. Well, it's when they get sent to slaughter, that's when they start getting fed, the grain. And then the issue with that is, there's like microplastics and all kinds of other garbage that gets into it. And so it's the grass finished part that you want to look out for, right? Because yeah, I mean, they're all getting fed grass at some point, but when they get sent to slaughter, it's like, okay, but what are they eating then?
And then on top of that too, because it's called mad cow syndrome, it's how they slaughter the animal dictates how pure that meat is going to be. And so when I learned that there was a slaughtering place factory in Florida next to my old church, and so before they would take the cows to the slaughtering house, a couple miles before they would get there, they would all start to moo, and they were quiet the entire time up until they get there, a couple miles away. And so their blood, they know what's going to happen because they smell the death of their brothers and their sisters. And they know it's inevitable. So they cry out as much as they can one last time. But what that ends up doing is even before they uncorral them from the U-Hauls, is it creates a negative blood life force inside of that animal. And so there's this very specific way to let an animal see its death. And so that's why we have the Hebraic laws that kind of teach us how to slaughter the animals correctly. There's very few. Well, I can't say that. There are farmers who know their stuff who will do it correctly and they won't slaughter anything and do it in an unclean manner. There is something that we have a little bit more in common with as far as like clean food in Islam is that people, Muslims, will kind of do it a little bit more halal or a little bit cleaner. But the thing is even if they're doing it clean, a lot of times they're like praying curses over it or praying the food to Allah. And so
Yeah.
even if it is done in that manner from the Arab, I love my brothers, but we got to get back on point here. And so the best way to get the best meat, kind of like how you mentioned, is probably by going to that market or just meeting. What I do for my goat milk, I'm working on getting a really good source for meat. Until then, I'm doing the grass fed, grass finished as much as I can. But in the meantime, I'm getting goat yogurt, goat butter, goat milk, goat ghee, goat cheese, a whole bunch of goat products from a goat farmer. And I know that he's not throwing anything extra in there. And so, what I would recommend to get a good quality meat is simply to find a farmer that you trust. Maybe they have a biblical background that's probably going to help anything out at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
that's basically the best source that we can go to. And what it's doing too is it's really just allowing us to support one another in a community mindset. And that's the way that it's supposed to be, as opposed to us going to Walmart and giving our dollar away to a corporation that we know they're basically the third leading cause of early death in the world.
Right. Yeah. They don't care about your health.
Not at all.
Absolutely
I
not.
probably won't eat another box of cereal again, like as long as I live. In all honesty.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's nuts once you start going down the rabbit hole too. And yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to have this conversation today because, you know, it's crazy. You and I were talking about just the information overload that we have to deal with anyway, and just existing in the world now, like it's kind of an inevitable, dealing with that. But the way that we can combat that is diet. Like it really all comes down to diet, as far as your health goes. And obviously with you look at everything biblically, and you actually have a book. I think it's called Bible Health Book. Is that
The
correct?
Bible Health Book, How to Heal. Right,
Yeah,
right.
tell us a little bit about that.
I started it like a year or two ago. It originally was 150 pages. Now we added onto it with the new information and everything like that. So it's about 250 pages. So if anybody wants to get that book, they can go to JacobsLink.com. And what we're trying to do is because, like you said, the easiest way to get out of this system is basically to heal because health is wealth. But there's sometimes so much stuff to get, and there's a lot to accumulate the knowledge and sometimes the products in one spot can be very difficult. So if you go to jacobslink.com, it's probably going to be the easiest website that's going to have all of the links that anybody could possibly want, not only for the Bible Health Book, not only for salt, not only for beef tallow or magnesium sleep valerian balm cream or cayenne or shilajit or beef liver. Grounding kits, everything that you need is going to be in the Jacobs link, even restored Hebraic Bibles. If people are trying to actually learn what they've taken from the people as far as the customs and the culture, going to jacobslink.com is probably, especially if you're struggling with your health, is going to be the best thing that you can do. But what we did is we set the Bible Health Book up where it comes with a month's supply of salt, at least to get that person started. And then it has the instructions and the manual and everything like that in the book. And then we have the other package where people can get the salt, the beef liver, the bentonite clay, the red heat lamps, as well, all in one bundle package with a consult. And I mention that because basically the protocols revolve around all of those things. So, protocol number one is going to rotate around salt, right? Because if the salt has lost its flavor, what good is it? You're the salt of the earth, and everybody is salt or magnesium deficient. So, getting the real salt or the salt of life that we have that's trace mineral tested is going to be crucial. Beef liver, sorry, salt, and then the master's cleanse is number one. So, salt, key lime, cayenne, and coconut oil. Usually people can get everything else at the store, or even everything at the store. I highly recommend a good quality salt, though, as organic of a product as you can find. So first step is the Master's Cleanse salt, cayenne, key lime, coconut oil. I have to say that. Sound like a broken record. I repeat it about 10, 30 times a day, but I have to repeat it because it's the number one question. Well, Jake, what do I do? And it's like,
Right.
it's in the videos, but there's so much information to sift through that it's like I got to repeat it because it's only going to help people out. So number one, Master's Cleanse. Number two, beef liver. The beef liver is the number one source for copper on the planet. The number one deficiency on the planet equals copper. And so as long as we're microdosing the copper, or we're at least eating copper dense foods, you can get a similar benefit instead of taking the beef liver capsules. If you were to eat beef liver or a steak or steaks every day with eggs, you probably wouldn't have to take the beef liver capsules. But regardless, I do, simply because it's a good quality beef liver desiccated powder, Argentinian, very good quality. I highly recommend everybody checks it out. So number one is the Master's Cleanse. Number two is the beef liver. And keep in mind, those two protocols right there, the Master's Cleanse, the salt, and the beef liver, is going to redirect all of the magnesium, the copper, and the iron that the body has been lacking for years. It's going to heal the body on a cellular, on a mitochondrial level. And so there's a part of the brain called the locus coeruleus that's made mostly out almost 100% copper, and it's basically responsible for sending an electrical signal throughout your body. And so if the locus coeruleus isn't getting that proper amount of copper, that part of your brain that's made out of copper, because we're kind of like computer chips, it's not going to function. And so that copper is very crucial when it comes to not only healing the brain and getting rid of brain fog, depression, restoring mental clarity, but restoring the immune function, getting rid of skin issues, because the copper, just like that retinol, it basically, and the retinol found in the copper dense animal products, heals the skin and it heals everything. I can't talk more or speak highly enough about copper, especially the animal based copper, because there's two different kinds of copper. We have the animal based copper that comes from the animals that have the ruminant kind of stomachs, or the multiple stomachs that they're made to digest the plant fiber. And then we have the plant based copper. And so if the human tries to eat the plant based copper, and the human has to digest the fibers and everything that's in that plant, the human isn't going to be able to digest that plant copper the way that he's going to be able to digest the animal based copper, because the animal has the multiple stomachs and it does, a lot of work for you that you don't have to do. And so that's also why when you go to drink the goat milk, you're going to be getting a lot of minerals. And you're not really going to have to worry about the pasteurization and everything else that goes on, as long as you get a raw form. But lost my train of thought there for a second. But what it goes back down to is consuming the animals that have the split hoof and that chew the cud. Those are going to be the most copper, magnesium dense foods on the planet. Those animals, they all have the rudimentary, if I'm saying that correctly, stomach chambers where they eat the cud, they chew the grass, the plants, whatever, and then their body is made specifically. It's an intelligent design from the Most High Himself to allow those animals to process that food more effectively than any other animals, so that when their offspring, or when we go to consume those animals, kind of like lambs, right? Not like a multiple meaning there. Those lambs and those goats and those cows, they really provide and they feed the body everything that they need. So the goat milk not only has the copper, not only has the magnesium, but the goat milk has the MCTs, triglycerides. Those MCTs and triglycerides, as well as creatine, because it's found in goat milk as well. It helps to rebuild the brain basically better than any other milk out there on the planet. And I've heard people say, well, yeah, what about for autism? You can use camel milk. And I'm like, you know what? If you wanted to consume the camel products, that's up to you. As far as me and my house, this is probably we're just gonna stick with the goat because it has the split
Yeah,
milk.
where do you even get that?
I'd,
That's funny.
I've heard it a couple times in the last like year or two. It's a very popular thing. That's like the information for moms who have like autistic children. They all are like, "Oh, camel milk." I'm like, "Man, maybe we should just stick with the goat milk because that's
Right.
a much more clean
That's
animal,
easier.
and it's in the Bible, so it makes
Yeah,
things easier." You know, and where are you
totally.
gonna get camel milk unless you like special, you know?
Unless you
But
live somewhere with camels, I guess. Yeah, that's crazy.
right, right,
Yeah, you're really selling me on the goat products. I honestly, I'm having this thought. I feel like, I mean, we know that they put all kinds of garbage in the, food, but I honestly think they modify our like genes to be averse to certain flavors because I can't do goat. Like I don't like the flavor of like goat dairy, but I know also that you can condition yourself to end up liking it over time. So nothing is just set in stone that way. So I'm like, man, if there's that many benefits, like I got to really get on it because my fiance is
yeah.
all over the goat cheese, all over the, everything. So I'm like, man, I gotta I gotta get on top of it.
The way that you see goat milk is kind of the way that I see beef liver. I really don't like the taste, but it's kind of like grandma and grandpa. Grandma, we gotta look to our elders, right? Our
Right.
ancestors, because it says in Jeremiah, it's not the path of your fathers that will set you free, it's the path of your ancestors that will set us
Mm,
free. Our ancestors, they were chilling with that beef liver in their back pocket, ready at all times, and they had that goat
yeah,
milk in the other back pocket at all times, right?
yeah,
And so without even knowing what the maybe they didn't read the specific verses about how to have that in your home in the Bible, but regardless, that was the culture back then, even 50, 60, 70 years ago. Beef liver, beef, butter, and milk and eggs. Okay, sweetheart, we're good for the week. Our family has everything that they need. We don't need anything else, do we? And
hmm,
no, they don't, because that's all that we need to feed our family. Specifically, this gets pretty deep, and we might have to bleep this out whenever it gets uploaded. But people who got the thing, goat milk, they're running out of goat milk in Asian countries because they're using the goat milk to cure people who got that thing
wow,
in 2020. And so that's how effective. And I had to really have some faith to look into the studies, rotating around Proverbs 27:27. Have enough goat milk for all of your home, but especially if you're young maidens. I had to really ponder, but why is it really in there? Because it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. And so I type in one day goat milk and then COV with the I and the other one,
wow,
probably a D. And then I was like, wow, this is miraculous. So every time I meet somebody who I jive with, I'm like, hey, did you look at that article? Or I'll send them that article, or I'll tell them to
yeah.
Google it, because it's literally mind blowing that the peptides
It's
that
crazy that
it
I haven't heard
compounds,
about that at all. Like that's nuts.
it's crazy. It's crazy.
I
And
mean, the
the answer
censorship is
to health
real.
has been there the whole time. What's that?
I said the censorship is real.
Every time I do a video, I have a 50% upload. I can upload 50%. The other 50% they'll take down. And so what I've learned to do over time is to, like cancer, I'll just say the C word.
Hmm.
Because even saying parasite, I'll just say
Yeah.
critter instead of parasites, because anything it seems that says parasite, they're going to use that eventually as a reason to take down the video. And so TikTok censorship is pretty real,
Yeah,
in my understanding.
TikTok is I have a way easier time with Instagram. They don't take anything down. They honestly don't care. It's like they've
Right.
been around for long enough that they're like, whatever, say whatever you want.
I had
I
them
mean, I'm
take
sure
down
they
the
might
first
crack down
video.
on it at some point, but
I
right
think
now
so too. I think they're slowly getting a little bit more strict, because actually yesterday, or on the 10th, they took down the first video out. Like, I've had it for a year, the count, and I've never seen that happen, but they removed one video.
oh man.
And so I was kind of shocked by that.
I did have that. Yeah, I had that happen like I think one time maybe a while ago. You know what's irritating about TikTok too is they'll take down something that's from like 9 months ago and I'm like, "What was that about?"
Yeah.
Usually they'll get it like immediately and I can pretty much appeal it and then they put it back up like pretty much 99% of the time, 95% of the time. I just tell them it's on other platforms, and they're like, okay, cool. We don't want to be the, loser that doesn't have it on our platform, so you can post
Right.
it.
A
So it's
lot of
pretty
people
rare
are
that.
migrating away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, it was really bad for me for a few months there. I mean, I've also been pregnant, so like my energy was kind of lower, so I wasn't really, and I think just emotionally too, I was like, I can't really handle like all of that right now. I need to just kind of protect my peace as much as I can. But yeah, it was pretty rough, and I think now it's slightly easier, but I think with the, I don't know what it was, the ban that they were, trying to do, I think that they changed their algorithm, and so now it's just like the algorithm flags stuff, and it's not like an actual person looking at it, and so they'll just flag, like you said, those keywords, and then usually again, once I appeal it, like an actual person looks at it and is like, oh, okay, never mind, this is fine.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But it's nuts. Yeah, so this has been an awesome conversation. I've loved having you here, and this is honestly the most coherent and just like no nonsense information as far as diet and health goes that I've come across. And I've studied this stuff and I live this lifestyle, but the way that you describe things, and always bringing it back to the scriptures, like it all really comes together in a very coherent way. So I'm very thankful for the work that you do. You're honestly doing God's work. And we'll have all the links down below for everything, for them to get connected with you on socials, and then to get the products if they're interested in that as well. But I'd love to let you, give any last thoughts, or if there's anything else that you think, people need to hear before we hop off.
Well, after reading the scriptures for a couple years, what I've done is I've created an equation so that if we ever get lost, because there's a lot of influencers, there's a lot of health information out on the market. And so I have like 10 health commandments, but listed so people aren't ever going to get led astray and they know what to eat and how to do it. But to summarize it, I'll go ahead and I'll say this is salt every offering, Leviticus 2:13. You want 5 to 10 grams of real, at least organic qualified salt a day. Have goat milk for all of your home, Proverbs 27:27. You want to get a real raw source for goat milk. You don't really want to get the pasteurized. What I'd recommend is the raw. If you can't get the raw, because I understand certain states, get the goat powder that's available on Amazon. That's going to be like protein powder, and it's actually going to be better than protein powder, especially if you have young children who can't put on weight. That goat powder and that goat milk, because you can add the two together, tastes great for a lot of people. And then you add the salt to it as well. So whenever you have milk, you want to add salt because the salt preserves it, makes it last long. So even when you just buy the milk, you add a couple grams of salt. And then when you go to drink the milk, you can also add the salt. But what that salt is going to do, the reason why McDonald's food tastes so good is because they add a lot of sugar and they add a lot of salt. And the salt is actually what makes the sugar even sweeter. So you get that similar taste bud style effect with just using regular salt and trying to avoid the sugars. But the thing is you get all the sugars that you need for the day and the carbohydrates and everything like that in that goat milk. So that's just something good to know on the side. I sometimes will drink like a gallon of goat milk a day, especially if I'm staying busy, right? I'm adding a couple grams of salt to that as well. So salt every offering, have goat milk for all of your home. Consume the animals that have the split hoof and that chew the cud. The the beef, the deer, the lamb, the goat, the ox. Those animals are going to be the most copper, magnesium dense foods on the planet. And basically, if you were to eat only beef liver or beef every day, I guarantee that within a couple weeks, as long as you're using salt in the master's cleanse, 90% to 100% of all of that disease that that person is suffering from is going to go away. And so, salt every offering, have goat milk for all of your home. Animals that have the split hoof that chew the cud. This kind only leaves by prayer and fasting, Matthew 17:21. So we're fasting 12 to 24 hours a day. no more than 14 hours a day if we're females, because we don't want to mess up our cycle. Now, while we're fasting, we want to be consuming the Master's Cleanse, or, herbs that will be for the healing of the nations, Revelations 22:2. So the salt, cayenne, key lime, coconut oil, while we're fasting, if we consume that while we fast, we're not going to spike the insulin. And so you're not going to really break the fast or mess up the fast. What we do is we increase the fasting results, the level of autophagy or cellular regeneration, because we're remineralizing and we're detoxing at the same time. And so as long as we stay with that thought process of remineralize and detox at the same time, we're always going to win. So that would summarize it. It's salt every offering, have goat milk for all of your home. Animals that have the split hoof that chew the cud, this kind only leaves by fasting and prayer on a regular basis. The herbs will be for the healing of the nations. And to finalize that, all of those verses equals, no disease will I place upon those who listen to my instructions. Exodus 15:26. And then it says as well, it's all in the Bible Health book, but I will cure them and I will reveal peace as well as truth to them, right? He literally tells us he's going to cure us, Jeremiah 33:6. And so when we add all of those verses together and we practice that on a regular disciple like basis, that's when all disease and infirmity, that's when all of the iron that has been mixed into the clay or the body, because he's the potter, we're the clay, that's when we become pure again and we're able to basically clean the life's force, which is the blood, Leviticus 17:11. And so following all of those protocols equals no disease will I place upon those who listen. I will cure you, Jeremiah 33:6. And then the life's force is going, your vitality is going to return back to you. But remember that the man's strength is in his gut, Job 40:16. So we have to practice these protocols before the strength or the vitality can return back to that person. And essentially what this is also teaching is, except a man be born of the water and the spirit, how else could we enter into the kingdom? And so what the water and the spirit also represents is the physical and the spiritual. And so when we start to practice the physical and the spiritual aspects and instructions found in the Bible, that's when we really truly start to thrive, because health truly equals wealth. And the Father wants us to be healthy before he wants us to be wealthy. And as long as we seek the kingdom first, right? Seek health and seek being at one before anything else, and everything else that you need and probably eventually want is going to be given to that person that's really pursuing the path of health. And really, the path of health equals the path of peace. And the path of health and peace equals the path of righteousness. And it's that path that's going to teach not only ourselves and the people around us, but the future generations how to overcome this beast system. And what we're doing, because it's basically the summarization of everything that, this ministry is based off of, is redemption of the seed. So even though you might have failed at life, not you, sorry, but even though somebody might have failed at life or they didn't do that great, that's okay, because you still have time to get your house in order for the redemption of the seed. Because as men, we learn that really, no matter what, our lives don't matter unless we're actually trying to provide for the community around us, creating an area where these kids can go to play and they can live and they can thrive, because at the end of the day, health truly is the best wealth.
Amen. So well said. I could not have put any of that so well myself. Thank you so much, Jacob. I can definitely testify for a lot of that. There's a lot more things that I'm going to be implementing just from learning from you. Definitely going to be getting that book, getting the salt, got to get started on that. I'm so excited. And I highly encourage all of you guys to do the same. Go ahead and follow Jacob. He's on Instagram, he's on TikTok. And then, wherever else you are, I'm sure it'll all be listed down there. I know you said you're starting up a podcast also soon. So y'all can go ahead and look forward to that. He's going to be sharing a lot of awesome information. So yeah, thank you so much, Jacob, for sharing your wisdom with us, for sharing your time with us today. And I'm just so appreciative, man. It was so great having you.
For sure. Thank you for having me on the show.
For sure. All right, y'all. Well, I will see you guys next time. I don't know what we're talking about next time. I forgot. I think we might be talking about New Age deception, and me sharing my personal testimony with that, and coming to Jesus. So stay tuned for that. Not sure when that'll come out. I'm due to give birth any day now, so we'll see. It might be a minute. This episode took a while, but I'm so happy that it did, because obviously we got to have Jacob and have him kind of share with us. So anyway, stay tuned for that, you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, y'all.